So we've covered a lot of stuff. We've covered a lot of information. The last thing we want to talk about, which is a really difficult subject, is sex crimes. So if you're accused of a sex crime or involved in a sex crime, like it feels as though you're sort of pushed with your back against a wall, no matter how you interpret it in this case. So what's the best way to understand what your, or not fear the situation? What should someone accused of a sex crime think about or do, or what's the first movement?
Again, it's the shut up is step one, of course, which we've discussed, and I think Steve will agree with me. But in the last, I guess since kind of the Me Too movement, I think any defense lawyer would probably agree with me that the strategy has changed. You don't just lawyer up and take the fifth. You don't want to make any statements to law enforcement, but once you've hired an attorney, you want to control the narrative.
Right.
If you're accused of something and it's a he said, she said, it doesn't look too good when it's just the alleged victim's statement going to the prosecutor. So that has changed quite a bit. Steve, you want to talk about?
Yeah, I always say probably what the public views as the most vile or despicable crimes, more so than even murder.
Sure.
Are child sex crimes.
Sure.
And for a good reason. We're dealing with children as victims, obviously, and so not only in addition to punishment, we have registration, sex offender registration, which you get put on that, and we talk about how a criminal record can have an impact on housing and employment.
Right.
You talk about even more than that is being on that sex offender registration. Any person, if you Google their name, boom, pops up. Their Missouri State Highway Patrol picture, their address, their tattoos, the vehicle they drove, the offense.
Wow.
We have multiple tiers of sex offender registration. We are working with somebody trying to get them off one of them. Those create major obstacles.
I mean, if you're a Tier 3 sex offender, you can only have approved electronic devices. You have to submit the lie detector test, polygraph test. That's lifetime supervision. So
I give you a real-life example. I have a client that I'm currently representing on a child sex crime. What's at stake for him is he would never be, if he were convicted and placed on the sex offender registration, he would never be able to drop off his child at school, never be able to pick up his child at school, never be able to go to virtually any game because it's going to be at a park, it's going to have playground equipment, there's rules on that.
Can't go to church.
That is, if you think about it in a real life perspective, I have 2 children and I go to all their events and games. It comprises virtually all my time outside of work.
Right.
And to remove that and say, I can't do that and go to a park. So these things have, not only from a punishment and possible prison time sentence, they go well beyond that even.
Yeah.
In terms of, like I said,
it's life altering.
Altering, no doubt. It's difficult for somebody to get an apartment. I've had clients that, they can't get an apartment. It's, where do you live if you can't afford a home and you can't, it's like RV. It makes it very difficult.
But you still have rights if you're accused of a sex crime.
Innocent until proven guilty. And so that's why it's, vital to have an attorney that's experienced in those cases. Matt Brown, our associate attorney, he's a former sex crimes prosecutor. In fact, the trial that he just got a not guilty on was a child sex crime. The guy was facing 3 life sentences. So, again, back to what we talked about earlier, are they experienced? Is that attorney experienced in this kind of a case? Mm-hmm. Is that attorney got not guilty on a child sex case? Those are check mark boxes. Combs Waterkotte, you can check mark those. Those are difficult cases to try. They're sensitive. There's a lot of emotions involved. And so there's all these things that come within a child sex case.
What is consent? Can you define it or label it?
In the sense of
Not child, of course.
Sure. I mean,
children can't consent, of course.
Yeah, and there's obviously children,
no, that doesn't exist.
Children can't consent. And
but in an adult level,
most people know like the common sense. But there's also ways in which I'll say what something might not be consent is somebody's too incapacitated. You see that
too much to drink,
drinking, drug use, and they could not consent, give informed consent. And we've dealt with cases at the college level or Title IX cases. Chris has had some of those cases where they say, well, this was rape or rape or whatever, statutory sodom, whatever the case may be, whatever the facts fit. But saying that individual, the alleged victim, could not consent due to an intoxication. And so, I mean, consent is consent. We know that. Hey, is this person willing to engage in a sexual act? Yes. Why I said that is we often see those facts of saying that was not consent because so-and-so was too intoxicated to give consent. See it a lot at the college scene, the intoxications, the fraternity parties, that kind of stuff, where they say that person was too intoxicated.
And that's a common element for consent. But what is it, if you were to define it, what does consent mean?
Yeah, I think, Steve kind of explained it, that is someone, a willing participant, and they have to have the ability to consent again. So
if somebody says no, which is silly, right?
That's clear. Actually
that's
clear. No consent there.
That is not consent.
Of course not.
Yeah. So if they say no, then you've gone beyond consent.
Right. I mean, and I think that's a clear example, and that's why I kind of used the one that I said.
No, that made sense. It made sense to level it to a degree.
Right. And you'll see sometimes, and I've had cases where you had two individuals engage in sexual acts or intercourse, and then perhaps one of the individuals, female, wakes up the next morning, is embarrassed, is ashamed, and then levies an accusation against the person, and who becomes our client. We're saying, whoa here. Right. Sometimes there's a motive or an agenda behind it. And so again, that goes to what we're trying to conduct, a thorough interview with the client. I've had a case where my client was accused of rape, and yet the very next day, the alleged victim is texting my client about getting back to seeing each other again. Well, something's not.
That seems odd.
It
right?
does. Something's not square here.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of folks that are saying, "Hey, I got sexually assaulted," and then, "Hey, you want to hang out the next day?"
Yeah.
And so back to our investigation. I mean, that's why it's critical is to leave no stone unturned, because we're looking at, and sometimes you may have to subpoena phone records of the other person. Snapchat is a big now. Mm-hmm. Subpoenaing Snapchat records, and there's a certain shelf life on those, and so that's why it is incredibly important from the outset is to get an attorney before some of these things may disappear, whether it be valuable evidence to support or help our client's position.
And allegations alone, will do it. Steve hit on this earlier, which is. There's people sitting in prison all over the country based upon what someone said. Testimony is evidence. We've got a lot of people, and I'm sure you do too, that call up and say, well, there's no evidence here. Well, just because someone said something, there's no, they think, well, there's no concrete evidence, but testimony is evidence. So, the allegation alone, can carry a lot of weight, of course.
And those are difficult cases because they become credibility in many respects. But again, it's imperative to have an attorney who is diligent in leaving no stone unturned, so we can uncover inconsistencies in the alleged victim's statements, stories, things that we can uncover evidentiary-wise to rebut these allegations, to contradict these allegations.
And that's what's important, right? And that's why you guys exist. That's why you're so good at what you do. And that's why people call you.
And details are very important in those situations, who touched who first, who undressed who, you
Sure.
who touched whose belt. So yeah, it's very detail specific in those cases.
Yeah, that's a really difficult subject, no matter how you look at it, especially when you involve children. Just I feel the depths of my stomach turn situations like that. But
And most people do, and that's why they're difficult.
but it's still, in the end, it's only fair that they get a proper defense.
They have constitutional rights.
Yeah.
Innocent until proven guilty.
And just because all these people are talking and saying all these things around town that this guy did this and this guy did that, it doesn't make him guilty or she guilty.
And a lot of times you see these allegations thrown around, and Steve touched on this, if there's a custody battle or if there's, a divorce, different things.
They're
like
trying
that.
to mount evidence or an
ulterior
evidentiary
motives.
goal.
That's you see arise in many of these cases.
Yeah.
Is there some other ulterior motive?
Interesting.
Many times it is the custody battle or a pending divorce looming, trying to position or leverage. So we try to see if there's any motives by any party to make these accusations.
Well, that's the investigation part. So this is wonderful. You guys are loads and loads of great information, and I hope the folks that joined us can experience anything near what I experienced from just having this conversation, a better understanding of what to do in situations, DWIs, domestic violence, coming across other general or felony-based situations. It's just a whole bunch of great stuff. So I really appreciate the time that you came and put in here with us today, and I hope that the folks that are watching also get a great value out of this experience. So we are the Power of X. We're in Hexen's studio, downtown St. Louis. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.